You know that friend who always seems to know exactly what you're feeling before you even say it? The one who can read a room like they have a sixth sense? Here's what most people don't realize: that ability didn't come from nowhere. It was born out of survival. Today, we're diving into the hidden psychology of children who became empaths not by choice, but by necessity. And if you've ever felt like you can feel too much, this might explain why. There's a specific type of child who grows up in a home where emotions are unpredictable, where the atmosphere can shift from calm to chaos in seconds. These children don't have the luxury of just being kids. Instead, they become tiny psychologists, constantly scanning faces, reading body language, analyzing tone of voice, all before they even learn to tie their shoes. This isn't a superpower they were born with. It's a survival mechanism. And while the world might later call them empaths or highly sensitive, the truth is far more complex and, honestly, far more painful. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how a child's brain rewires itself to survive, and why so many empaths carry invisible wounds into adulthood. Let's start with the environment. Picture this. A child wakes up every morning not knowing which version of their parent they allow meet at the breakfast table. Will it be the warm, loving parent? Or the angry, distant one? There's no pattern, no predictability, no safety. In homes like this, the emotional climate is volatile. Maybe there's addiction, mental illness, rage, neglect, or just profound inconsistency. The child learns quickly that their own safety, emotional and sometimes physical, depends on their ability to predict and manage the emotions of the adults around them. So what does the child do? They become hypervigilant. Their nervous system goes into overdrive. They start watching everything. The way a door closes, the length of a pause in conversation, a slight change in facial expression. These become data points in an internal system designed for one purpose: predict danger before it arrives. Neuroscience backs this up. Studies show that children in unpredictable or emotionally volatile environments develop what's called a threat detection system that's constantly activated. Their amygdala, the brain's alarm system, becomes hypersensitive. They're essentially living in a state of chronic low-level anxiety, always scanning, always anticipating. And here's the heartbreaking part. This works. The child who can sense their parent's mood and adjust their behavior accordingly gets hurt less. They learn to soothe, to manage, to disappear when needed, to perform when required. They become emotional chameleons. But there's a cost. Let's talk about what's actually happening in the child's mind. When you grow up having to manage other people's emotions just to feel safe, something profound happens. Your sense of self becomes tied to other people's emotional states. Child development experts call this enmeshment, or lack of differentiation. The child never learns where they end and others begin. Their feelings become secondary, their needs become invisible. They develop what psychologists call an external locus of control, meaning their sense of safety and worth comes entirely from outside themselves. Think about it. If you're a 7-year-old who's learned that your job is to keep mom calm or prevent dad from exploding, you're not developing your own identity. You're developing a sensor, an emotional radar system. You're becoming a human barometer for other people's feelings. And this creates a specific psychological profile. These children often become what's called parentified. They take on adult emotional responsibilities way too early. They become mediators, peacekeepers, therapists to their own parents. They learn to suppress their own needs because expressing them feels dangerous. Here's where it gets really interesting. This isn't just psychological, it's neurological. Brain imaging studies show that people who experienced emotional unpredictability in childhood have different brain activity patterns. Their mirror neurons, the neurons responsible for empathy, are incredibly active. They're literally wired differently. They can feel what you're feeling because their survival once depended on it. Fast forward to adulthood. That child is now grown, but the survival mechanism remains. They walk into a room and immediately feel the emotional temperature. They can sense tension no one else notices. They know when someone's lying, when someone's hurting, when someone's about to break. On the surface, this looks like a gift, and in many ways, it can be. These are the friends who show up when you're struggling. The partners who understand you without words. The therapists, teachers, nurses, artists who can hold space for human pain. But here's what people don't see: the exhaustion, the constant emotional overwhelm, the inability to turn it off. Many adult empaths struggle with boundaries because they never learned they were allowed to have them. They attract narcissists and energy vampires because their radar for emotional need is so finely tuned. They feel responsible for other people's feelings because that's what kept them safe as children. They also struggle with something called emotional contagion. They don't just sense other people's emotions, they absorb them. Walk past someone who's anxious, and suddenly they're anxious. Sit with someone who's depressed, and they feel depressed. It's exhausting. It's confusing. And often, they don't even realize these aren't their own feelings. Many empaths also deal with chronic anxiety, depression, or complex PTSD because that hypervigilant nervous system never learned to relax. The threat detection system that saved them as children now sees danger everywhere, even when they're safe. So what's the path forward? How does someone who became an empath to survive actually heal? First, there's recognition. Understanding that your empathy isn't just a personality trait, it's a survival response. That recognition alone can be incredibly powerful. Second, there's learning differentiation. This means learning to distinguish between your feelings and other people's feelings. It means asking yourself, is this mine, or am I picking this up from someone else? It sounds simple, but for someone who's never made that distinction, it's revolutionary. Third, there's boundary work. Learning that you're not responsible for other people's emotions. That you can care about someone without carrying their pain. That saying no doesn't make you selfish, it makes you human. Fourth, there's nervous system regulation. Because that hypervigilant system needs to learn safety. This might mean therapy, somatic work, meditation, or other practices that teach the body that the threat has passed. And finally, there's grieving the childhood that required this adaptation. Grieving the self that got lost in the process of managing everyone else. This is hard work, but it's necessary work. If you recognize yourself in this story, I want you to know something. Your empathy is real, and it has value. But you didn't have to earn your right to exist by managing other people's emotions. You were worthy of safety and love just as you were. The child who learned to survive by feeling everything did an incredible job. But the adult you are now gets to choose differently. You get to feel without taking responsibility for what you feel. You get to care without caring. You get to be sensitive without being depleted. That's not losing your empathy, that's reclaiming yourself. If this resonated with you, subscribe for more deep dives into psychology, trauma, and healing. And drop a comment below, I'd love to hear your experience. You're not alone in this.